The call came at 3 a.m., exactly 1 year after Mark stole everything from me. I was still awake, nursing a glass of wine and staring at old family photos, a habit I'd developed since losing both the business and my parents in the same cruel year. My name is Viviana, and until last year, I was the co-heir to Swanson Technologies, a company my parents built from nothing. Now I'm just another unemployed tech executive with a vendetta. Your brother's making mistakes, the voice on the phone said. Big ones. Thought you might want to know. I sat up straighter, wine forgotten. Who is this? Someone who thinks you got a raw deal. Check your email. And Viviana, Meridian Tech is hiring. The line went dead before I could respond. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop, finding a single new email containing internal documents from my family's company. Now Mark's company. The financials were worse than I'd imagined. Bastards running it into the ground, I whispered, scrolling through the numbers. My phone buzzed. A text from my Aunt Rachel. Can't sleep either? Come over. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Rachel's kitchen, the familiar scent of her chamomile tea filling the air. She'd been more of a mother to me since my parents died, especially after Mark's betrayal. You look like you've seen a ghost, Rachel said, sliding a steaming mug toward me. I just got some interesting information about Mark's company. I pulled out my phone, showing her the documents. He's making exactly the mistakes Dad always warned us about. Rachel's eyes narrowed as she studied the screen. And what do you plan to do with this information? I don't know yet. I did know, but I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Remember last month when I tried to confront him at the office? How could I forget? Security escorted you out while he watched from his window. The memory made my blood boil. He didn't even have the decency to face me, just stood there, drinking Dad's favorite whiskey from Dad's crystal glass in Dad's office. Your office, Rachel corrected. It should have been yours too. He had it all planned, I said, the words bitter in my mouth. While Mom and Dad were in the hospital after the accident, he was already meeting with lawyers, changing documents, moving assets. By the time they passed, I couldn't finish the sentence. Rachel reached across the table, squeezing my hand. What are you thinking, Vivi? Meridian Tech is hiring. Mark's biggest competitor? Rachel's eyebrows shot up. Now that would be interesting. My phone buzzed again. Elena, my best friend since college, requesting a video call. I answered, and her concerned face filled the screen. Vi, I just saw the news. Mark's announcing his engagement tomorrow. What? The mug slipped from my hand, spilling tea across Rachel's pristine tablecloth. To who? Gabriella Joseph. That investor's daughter he's been seeing. There's going to be a press conference in the morning. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course. He takes the company, and now he's going to play happy families in front of the cameras. The prodigal son carrying on our parents' legacy. Don't let him win, Elena said firmly. Not like this. Rachel was already cleaning up the spilled tea, but her eyes were fixed on me. She's right. You're stronger than him, Viviana. Always have been. I stood up, my decision made. I need to go home and update my resume. Meridian Tech's going to want to see it first thing in the morning. What are you planning? Elena asked through the phone. I looked at the family photo on Rachel's wall. Mom, Dad, Mark, and me at the company's 20th anniversary celebration. We were all smiling then, before the accident, before the betrayal. I'm planning to take back what's mine, I said. But first, I'm going to learn exactly how he did it. Rachel nodded slowly. Your father always said the best revenge is success. This isn't about revenge, I lied, gathering my things. It's about justice. As I drove home through the empty streets, my anonymous caller's words echoed in my mind. Mark was making mistakes, big ones, and soon, very soon, I would make him pay for every single one of them. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Interview tomorrow, 9 a.m. Maurice Brown's office. Don't be late. I smiled for the first time in what felt like years. Game on, big brother, game on. Maurice Brown's office was everything my father's hadn't been. Sleek, modern, and intimidating. The man himself sat behind a glass desk, studying my resume with an intensity that made me nervous. "Your credentials are impressive," he said, finally looking up. "But let's address the elephant in the room. You're Mark's sister." I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Now I'm just someone who knows every aspect of how Swanson Technologies operates." A slight smile crossed his face. "And why should I believe you'd be loyal to Meridian?" "Because my brother made sure I have nothing left to lose." I leaned forward. "He betrayed me, Mr. Brown. But more importantly, he's destroying everything my parents built. I want to help Meridian become what Swanson Technologies should have been." Maurice stood up, walking to his window. "Call me Maurice, and tell me, what would you do differently?" For the next hour, I outlined everything I'd seen in those leaked documents, explaining exactly how Mark's decisions were weakening the company. Maurice listened intently, occasionally interrupting with sharp questions that proved he understood exactly what I was talking about. "You start Monday," he said finally. "Junior executive position. Prove yourself, and we'll talk about more." 3 months later, I was staying late at the office when I overheard voices from the conference room. "Swanson Technologies lost another major contract," someone said. "Third one this quarter." I pressed myself against the wall, listening. "Mark's getting desperate," another voice added. "Word is, he's trying to arrange a merger with Pacific Solutions to stay afloat." My heart raced. Pacific Solutions was notorious for gutting companies and selling them for parts. I pulled out my phone and texted Elena. "Need you to dig into Pacific Solutions. Anything you can find." Elena, a financial journalist, replied instantly, "Already on it. Having drinks with Donald tomorrow, Mark's best man. He loves to talk when he's drunk." I smiled. Elena had always been brilliant at getting information out of people. The next morning, Maurice called me into his office. "Your proposal for the Anderson account was exceptional. The board wants you to lead the presentation next week." "Thank you, but you heard about Pacific Solutions," he finished, studying my face. "News travels fast in this industry." I nodded. "If Mark merges with them, everything my parents built will be destroyed." "Then stop it." Maurice's voice was calm but firm. "Show me what you can really do, Viviana." That evening, I met Rachel for dinner at our usual spot. The restaurant was quiet, perfect for sensitive conversations. "Pacific Solutions." Rachel's fork clattered against her plate. "He wouldn't dare." "He would," I said, pushing my food around. "He's desperate. The company's hemorrhaging money. Your father would be heartbroken." Rachel reached for her wine. "When are you going to make your move?" "Soon, but I need more allies, more resources." My phone buzzed. "Elena, you won't believe what Donald just told me. Call me ASAP." "Excuse me," I said to Rachel, stepping outside to call Elena. "Pacific Solutions isn't Mark's only option," Elena said, without preamble. "Donald let slip that there's a board meeting next week. They're considering other buyers." "Who?" "He wouldn't say, but he mentioned the Anderson contract. Apparently, Mark's counting on it to keep the company attractive to buyers. The same contract I was presenting to next week." The pieces started falling into place. Back inside, Rachel took one look at my face and knew. "You've found something." "Maybe." I took a deep breath. "But I need to move carefully. One wrong step, and Mark will see me coming." "He's too arrogant for that," Rachel said. "He still thinks you're broken. Use that." Later that night, working late at Meridian, I noticed Maurice watching me from his office. He walked over, coffee in hand. "The Anderson presentation isn't just about landing a client, is it?" he asked. I met his gaze. "No, it's not." "Good." He set the coffee on my desk. "Because I didn't hire you just for your expertise. I hired you because I recognize that look in your eyes. The look that says you're willing to do whatever it takes to win." "Is that enough?" "It's a start." He turned to leave, then paused. "Your brother's hosting a charity gala next weekend. Meridian just received an invitation. I think it's time we introduced his sister, the rising star of Meridian Tech, to our business partners, don't you?" I smiled, already imagining Mark's face when he saw me there. I believe it is. The charity gala was being held at the same hotel where we'd celebrated my parents' last anniversary. Mark had chosen it deliberately, I was sure. He always did have a talent for twisting the knife. Ready? Elena adjusted my emerald dress in the hotel lobby. You look like $1,000,000. Make that 10 million, Maurice said, appearing beside us in an impeccable tuxedo. The investors will love you. I touched the diamond pendant at my neck, Mom's favorite, rescued from the house before Mark could claim it. Let's go make some new friends. The ballroom was packed with the city's business elite. I spotted Mark immediately, holding court near the stage, with his new fiancée, Gabriella, on his arm. He hadn't seen me yet. Viviana, Donald's voice boomed across the room. Mark's head snapped up, his champagne glass freezing halfway to his lips. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of fear before his practiced smile returned. Donald, I greeted Mark's best man warmly. How lovely to see you again. You know each other? Mark appeared at Donald's side, Gabriella in tow. We've met, I said sweetly. Donald's been very informative about the business lately. Donald, already tipsy, didn't catch the tension. Viviana's doing amazing things at Meridian. Did you know she landed the Anderson account? Mark's smile tightened. Did she? Actually, Maurice interrupted smoothly. Viviana's been instrumental in several of our recent successes. We're lucky to have her. How wonderful, Gabriella said genuinely, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrent. Mark, you never mentioned your sister was so accomplished. There's a lot Mark doesn't mention, I said, locking eyes with my brother. Isn't there? Before he could respond, Elena appeared with an elderly gentleman in tow. Viviana, Mr. Patterson wants to discuss your proposals for technological integration in the healthcare sector. Excuse me, I said to Mark. Business calls. As I walked away, I heard Gabriella ask, Darling, why didn't you tell me Viviana was working for Meridian? The next hour was a blur of handshakes and strategic conversations. I worked the room exactly as Dad had taught us, making connections, dropping hints about Meridian's upcoming projects, watching potential investors' eyes light up with interest. You're a natural, Maurice murmured, appearing at my elbow with fresh champagne. 3 investors have already asked about private meetings. Make that 4, Rachel said, joining us. I just overheard the Thompson Group discussing how they might need to reconsider their existing partnerships. Their existing partnership with Mark, you mean? I took a sip of champagne, scanning the room. Where is he? Having an intense discussion with the board members by the bar, Elena reported, materializing with her journalist's notebook discreetly palmed. They don't look happy. I watched Mark gesture frantically, his usual composure cracking. One of the board members shook his head and walked away. Trouble in paradise, Maurice asked innocently. The Anderson contract was supposed to save him, I said. Without it, Viviana. Mark's voice was tight with controlled anger. He'd approached without me noticing. A word, I followed him to a quiet corner, aware of Elena and Rachel watching protectively. What are you playing at? He hissed. Playing? I'm working, Mark. Something you might want to try, instead of selling off pieces of Mom and Dad's legacy. His face reddened. You have no idea what it takes to run this company. No, you made sure of that when you changed their will while they were dying. I kept my voice low but sharp. How's that working out for you? I heard Pacific Solutions is interested in buying. Mark grabbed my arm. Stay out of this, Vivi. You're in over your head. Let go of my sister. Rachel's voice cut through the tension. She stood there, every inch the family matriarch, with Maurice and Elena flanking her. Mark released me, straightening his jacket. Family matters should stay in the family. You lost the right to talk about family, Rachel said coldly, the day you betrayed yours. As Mark stormed off, Elena touched my arm. You okay? Better than okay, I said, watching him return to his increasingly worried-looking board members. Donald just texted me. The board's calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Maurice smiled. Perfect timing. shall we announce Meridian's new healthcare initiative? The one that just happened to be Mark's biggest potential growth sector. I nodded, straightening my mother's pendant. Time to twist the knife. Rachel squeezed my hand. Your parents would be proud. Not of the revenge, maybe, but of how brilliantly you fight. This isn't just about revenge anymore, I said, watching Gabriella console a visibly agitated Mark across the room. It's about justice, and it's just beginning. The morning after the gala, Elena burst into my office at Meridian without knocking. You're not going to believe this. I looked up from my laptop. The board meeting. Better. She tossed a USB drive onto my desk. Donald got drunk at brunch and left his laptop unlocked. Mark's been cooking the books for months. Maurice walked in just as I plugged in the drive. Close the door, I said. The files painted a damning picture. Mark had been inflating profits, hiding losses, and moving money between accounts to keep the company looking stable. This is exactly what we need, Maurice said, studying the screen. But we have to move carefully. One wrong step, and he could destroy evidence. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Mark just called. He's moving up the wedding. 2 weeks from now. He's panicking, Elena said, reading over my shoulder, trying to look stable for the investors. Or trying to get married before everything falls apart, I added. Either way, we need to move faster. Maurice nodded. I'll call an executive meeting. It's time to discuss a hostile takeover. Wait. I held up my hand. I have a better idea. Donald mentioned something at the gala about Mark's private server. Elena's eyes lit up. The one with all the original company documents? Including, I said slowly, the real version of our parents' will. The next day, I met Donald for coffee. He was already seated when I arrived, nervously checking his phone. Thanks for meeting me, I said, sliding into the chair across from him. Mark's going crazy, trying to find out who accessed his private files. Donald wiped his brow. He doesn't suspect me yet, but you're worried he will, I finished. Help me, Donald. Help me prove what he did. Why should I? Because you were there. I leaned forward. You were at the hospital that day. You saw him with those lawyers while our parents were dying. Donald's hands shook as he lifted his coffee. He's my best friend. Is he? Or is he just the guy who's been using you to cover up his crimes? 3 hours later, I walked into Maurice's office with a signed statement from Donald and access codes to Mark's private server. You've been busy, Maurice said, impressed. I learned from the best. I sat down, pulling out my tablet. Now, about that takeover. The next week was a whirlwind of secret meetings and careful planning. Elena kept feeding false stories to other journalists, directing attention away from our real moves. Rachel worked her social connections, quietly swaying key investors. Then came the text I'd been waiting for. Wedding rehearsal dinner tonight. Mark insisted I invite you, says it's time to heal the family. Gabriella, it's a trap, Elena said when I showed her. Of course it is, I smiled. That's what makes it perfect. The restaurant was exclusive, the kind of place Mark loved to flaunt his wealth. I arrived fashionably late, making sure everyone noticed my entrance. Viviana, Gabriella rushed to hug me. I'm so glad you came. Mark approached more slowly, champagne in hand. Sister, decided to accept the olive branch. How could I miss my only brother's wedding? I raised my glass. To new beginnings. Donald caught my eye from across the room, giving a subtle nod. The server was ours. Speech, someone called out. Let's hear from the best man. Donald stood, swaying slightly. I've known Mark for years. Been through everything with him, including, he paused, glancing at me. Some things I'm not proud of. Mark's face darkened. Donald. But tonight's about family, Donald continued. About truth, about doing what's right. My phone vibrated. A message from Maurice. Documents secured. Board members notified. Green light. I stood up, cutting off Donald's speech. Actually, I'd like to say something. The room fell silent. Mark's knuckles went white around his glass. Tomorrow morning, I said clearly, the board of Swanson Technologies will receive proof of extensive financial fraud. They'll also receive the original version of our parents' will, the one Mark replaced while they were dying. Gasps filled the room. Gabriella's hand flew to her mouth. "You have no proof," Mark snarled. "Check your private server," I suggested. "Oh wait, you can't. The authorities already have." The sound of breaking glass echoed as Mark's champagne flute shattered in his grip. "You're bluffing," he whispered. I pulled out my phone, showing him the screen. His face went pale. "The real question," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is whether your lovely bride wants to be married to a man who's about to be charged with fraud and theft." As chaos erupted around us, I caught Rachel's proud smile from across the room. The game wasn't over, but I'd just made my winning move. The morning after the rehearsal dinner bombshell, I sat in Maurice's office, watching the chaos unfold on multiple news channels. Mark's fraud was front-page news, and Gabriella's family had publicly withdrawn their investment. "Your brother's outside," Maurice's assistant announced through the intercom. "Send him in." I straightened in my chair as Mark burst through the door, looking like he hadn't slept. "Fix this," he demanded. "Fix what?" I kept my voice calm. "The fraud you committed, the will you forged, or the mess you've made of our parents' company. You don't understand." He ran his hands through his disheveled hair. "I had to take control. You weren't ready. That wasn't your decision to make. I'll give you anything you want," he pleaded. "Name your price." The door opened again. Maurice walked in with Elena and two men in suits. "Mr. Swanson," one of the men said, "I'm from the Securities and Exchange Commission. We need you to come with us." As they led Mark away, Elena handed me a tablet. "The board just voted. They're removing him as CEO, effective immediately." "And?" I asked, knowing there was more. "And they're considering Meridian's offer for a merger." Maurice smiled. "With you at the helm of both companies." My phone rang. "Rachel, turn on channel 7, she said, without greeting. "Gabriella's giving a press conference." I grabbed the remote, switching screens. Gabriella stood at a podium, her engagement ring noticeably absent. "While I care deeply for Mark," she was saying, "I cannot and will not be associated with someone who would betray their own family and commit fraud. The wedding is off." "That's gotta hurt," Elena muttered. "Not as much as this will," I said, pulling up an email. "Donald just sent over the footage from Dad's office the day they died. Security cameras caught everything." We watched in silence as the video played. Mark ushering lawyers in through the back door, signing documents while our parents lay unconscious in the hospital. "Release it," Maurice advised. "End this completely." "Wait," I stared at the screen. "There's something else we can do." That afternoon, I walked into the boardroom of Swanson Technologies for the first time since Mark had taken over. The board members sat around the massive table, looking shell-shocked. "Gentlemen," I began, "you have two options. A messy public merger with Meridian that will drag this company's reputation through more mud, or a clean private transition of power back to its rightful heir. You have proof?" the chairman asked. "Of the original will?" I placed a folder on the table. "I have everything. But I'm willing to keep the worst of it quiet if you do the right thing." "And what's that?" "Restore the company to joint ownership between Mark and me, as our parents intended. But with one condition: I have sole executive control." The chairman leaned forward. "And what happens to Mark?" "He keeps his shares, but steps down completely. No charges filed, no more public scandal. He gets to save face, and the company survives." Elena slipped into the room, handing me a note. I read it and smiled. "Oh, and Mark agrees. He's signing the papers as we speak." The board members exchanged glances. "All those in favor?" the chairman asked. Hands raised unanimously. Later that evening, I sat in what had once been Dad's office and would soon be mine again. Rachel poured champagne into crystal glasses. "Your parents would be proud," she said, handing me one. "Though I'm surprised you let Mark keep his shares." "Sometimes mercy is the better revenge," I replied. "Besides, watching me run his company will be punishment enough." My phone buzzed. A text from Maurice. Merger announcement tomorrow. Ready to shock the business world? Elena walked in, carrying a stack of papers. The press is going crazy. Everyone wants to know how you did it. Let them wonder. I stood up, walking to the window. The city lights sparkled below, just as they had the night I'd gotten that mysterious phone call. We have work to do. Speaking of work, Elena said carefully, Donald's asking about that job you promised him. Head of security, I confirmed. He earned it. His evidence made this possible. Rachel raised her glass. To justice. To family, Elena added. I touched the diamond pendant at my neck, thinking of Mom and Dad. To legacy. As we drank, I noticed a small package on the desk, wrapped in familiar paper. The card read, You won. But remember, power comes with responsibility. Mark. Inside was Dad's old fountain pen, the one he'd used to sign every major contract. Well, I said, picking up the pen, shall we start fixing what he broke? The real work was just beginning. But for the first time in years, I felt truly ready. 6 months after taking control of the company, I found myself staring at an unexpected email. Mark wanted to meet. It's a bad idea, Elena said when I told her. We were having lunch in my office, surrounded by stacks of merger paperwork. Probably, I agreed. But he's still my brother. He's still the man who betrayed you, she reminded me. My phone lit up with a text from Maurice. Board meeting in 10. Bring the quarterly reports. We'll finish this later, I told Elena, gathering my files. The boardroom was packed. Our merger with Meridian had exceeded all expectations. And today, we were announcing another record quarter. The prodigal daughter delivers again, the chairman beamed as I presented the numbers. After the meeting, Rachel was waiting in my office. You're meeting him, aren't you? How did you? I'm having dinner with his ex-fiancée tonight, she explained. Gabriella mentioned he's been trying to make amends. I sank into my chair. What do you think he wants? Only one way to find out. The restaurant Mark chose was quiet, upscale, and neutral territory. He was already there when I arrived, looking thinner than I remembered. You look good, he said as I sat down. Success suits you. What do you want, Mark? He pulled out an envelope. To give you this. Inside was a letter, handwritten. I recognized Dad's writing immediately. Where did you get this? Found it in his desk drawer last week. It's dated 3 days before the accident. Mark's voice cracked slightly. Read it. The letter was addressed to both of us. My dearest children, if you're reading this, something has happened to your mother and me. The company is yours, both of yours. Together, you're stronger than either of you alone. Don't let pride or ambition destroy what we've built. Love, Dad. Why are you showing me this now? I asked, my hands shaking. Because I was wrong. Mark looked down at his untouched wine. I thought I was protecting our legacy, but I was just afraid. Afraid you'd be better at this than me. I am better at this than you. He actually smiled. Yes, you are. That's why I'm not contesting anything. You've earned this. Mark, let me finish. He held up his hand. I'm leaving the country. Starting fresh in London. But before I go, I needed you to know, I'm sorry. For everything. My phone buzzed. A message from Donald. Emergency at the office. Server breach. Need you here now. I have to go. I stood up. There's a situation. Of course, Mark nodded. You're the boss now. At the office, I found Donald and our IT team huddled around monitors. Someone's trying to access the old private server, Donald explained. The one with the original documents, I finished. Can you trace it? Already did. He looked uncomfortable. It's coming from Pacific Solutions. My blood ran cold. I turned to Mark's old office, now mine, and froze. Through the glass walls, I could see someone at my computer. Call security, I whispered to Donald. But before he could move, Elena appeared beside us. Don't bother, look. On every screen in the office, documents were appearing. Proof that Pacific Solutions had been planning to strip our company for parts long before Mark's downfall. They were never going to save the company, I realized. They were going to destroy it. Check the trace again, Elena urged Donald. He typed rapidly. It's coming from Mark's laptop, in London. My phone buzzed with a text. Consider it my parting gift. Take care of our legacy. M. Rachel called moments later. Gabriella just told me something interesting. Pacific Solutions is scrambling. Someone leaked their entire acquisition strategy to the press. I looked at Dad's letter, still in my hand. Mark did one thing right, finally. What now? Donald asked. Now, I said. We do what Dad wanted. We build something stronger. Elena grinned. Together. Together. Later that night, alone in the office, I opened Dad's old desk drawer and found another surprise. A photo of Mark and me at our first company picnic, barely teenagers, both grinning proudly in matching company t-shirts. My phone lit up with one final text from Mark. You were always the better choice. Make them proud. I placed the photo next to Dad's letter and our latest quarterly report. The past and present, side by side. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now I had peace. And sometimes that's better than revenge. 1 year to the day after taking control of the company, I stood in the lobby watching workers install the new sign. Swanson Meridian Technologies. The merged companies, stronger than ever, just as Dad had wanted. Quite a view, Maurice said, joining me. But we have a situation upstairs. In the conference room, Elena and Donald waited with grim faces. Pacific Solutions is making moves again, Elena announced. They're targeting Mark's London operations. What? I leaned forward. Why? Revenge, Donald said, pulling up emails on the screen. They're still bitter about the leaked documents. They want to destroy everything connected to the Swanson name. My phone rang. Rachel. Turn on the financial news, now. The television flickered to life, showing Mark at a press conference in London. He looked tired, but determined. Yes, Pacific Solutions is attempting a hostile takeover, he was saying. But they've underestimated the strength of family. The camera panned to show the London Stock Exchange ticker. Pacific Solutions stock was plummeting. What did you do? I whispered at the screen. My answer came in the form of an email from Mark. Remember Dad's old contingency plans? I implemented them all. Pacific Solutions just tried to buy a shell company. They'll be bankrupt by morning. He protected us, Elena said, amazed. He actually protected the company. Both companies, Maurice corrected. The London branch and ours are still legally connected. If Pacific Solutions had succeeded, they would have had a backdoor to everything we've built, I finished. Donald's computer chimed. Incoming video call from London. Mark's face appeared on the screen, the London skyline behind him. Hello, sister. I assume you've seen the news. Why didn't you tell me they were coming after you? Because you would have tried to help. He smiled sadly. I needed to do this myself, to prove I could protect our legacy instead of destroying it. The contingency plans, I said. You remembered them all this time? Dad drilled them into us every Sunday dinner for years. Always have a backup plan, he'd say. Always protect the family business. Rachel burst into the room. Pacific Solutions just announced emergency restructuring. Their CEO resigned. Perfect timing, Mark said. Check your email, Vivi. I opened his message to find documents transferring his remaining shares to me. Mark? No. Yes, he interrupted. The company belongs with you. I'm starting fresh, building something new, something Dad would be proud of. He'd be proud of you right now, I said softly. Perhaps. Mark looked away for a moment. I have to go. Board meeting to attend. My last one. After he disconnected, Maurice cleared his throat. The press will want a statement. Let them wait, Rachel said. Family comes first. I stared at the share transfer documents, remembering all the Sunday dinners, all Dad's lessons, all the years Mark and I had spent learning the business together. Donald, I said suddenly, can you pull up the original company charter? He typed quickly. Here it is. Why? Look at Article 3. I pointed to the screen. About subsidiary companies. Elena leaned in. Any independently operated branch can maintain autonomous leadership while remaining under the parent company's protection. The London office, Maurice realized. You're going to let him keep running it. As a subsidiary, I confirmed, already drafting the paperwork. He proved himself today. Maybe it's time I prove something too. What's that? Rachel asked. That forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger. I called Mark back. When his face appeared, he looked surprised. The shares, I said. I'm not accepting them, but I am offering you a deal. By sunset, the papers were signed. Mark would retain control of the London operations as a subsidiary, while I maintained oversight of the global company. Pacific Solutions was finished, and our parents' legacy was secure. To new beginnings, Elena raised her glass in my office later that night. To family, Rachel added. To forgiveness, I said, touching Mom's pendant. My phone lit up with a final message from Mark. Sunday dinner next time I'm in town. I smiled, remembering Dad's voice. Always protect the family business. Yes, I typed back. We have a lot of catching up to do. Outside my office window, the new company sign glowed in the darkness, a beacon of everything we'd lost and found again. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't in revenge, but in redemption. Maurice appeared in my doorway, ready for tomorrow's challenges. More than ready, I said, standing up. We have a legacy to build. The autumn wind rustled through the cemetery as I placed fresh flowers on my parents' grave. The marble headstone gleamed in the morning light, recently cleaned and restored. I thought I'd find you here. Mark's voice came from behind me. I turned to see my brother, looking more like himself than he had in years. Your flight got in early. Couldn't sleep on the plane. He placed his own bouquet next to mine, too busy thinking about today. Today marked the official global merger celebration of Swanson Meridian Technologies. Both branches, London and domestic, operating in perfect sync at last. They'd be proud, I said, touching the headstone. Of both of us. Of you? Definitely. Mark straightened his tie. I'm still working on earning it back. My phone buzzed. Elena, everything's ready at the venue. Maurice is keeping the press entertained. We should go, I said. Rachel will kill us if we're late. At the convention center, the atmosphere crackled with excitement. Hundreds of employees, investors, and media representatives filled the main hall. There you are, Rachel hurried over. Donald's about to start the presentation. On the massive screen, images flashed, showing the company's journey, from our parents' first small office to the global enterprise it had become. Ready for this? Mark whispered, as we waited backstage. Are you? He smiled, a real smile, like when we were kids. Actually, yes. Donald's voice boomed through the speakers. Please welcome our CEO, Viviana, and the head of our London operations, Mark. The applause was deafening as we walked out together. A year ago, I began, this company nearly fell apart. Today we're stronger than ever. Because we remembered what matters most, Mark added. Family, legacy, trust. Maurice joined us on stage, carrying a familiar wooden box. Inside was Dad's old fountain pen, the one that had signed the original company documents. Today, I announced, we're not just celebrating a merger, we're celebrating a reunion. Mark opened a leather folder, revealing new partnership documents. From this day forward, all major decisions will require both signatures, London and domestic, just as our parents intended. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I signed. When Mark took his turn, his hands were steady. There's one more thing, I said into the microphone. We're establishing the Swanson Foundation for Business Ethics, ensuring that what happened to our family never happens to another. Elena appeared with another document, the Foundation's charter. The first board meeting is next week, she said. Gabriella agreed to serve as chairwoman. Mark's eyebrows shot up. My ex-fiancée. Who better to oversee ethical business practices? I grinned. She's got experience spotting red flags. The laughter from the audience broke any remaining tension. Later, at the celebration dinner, Rachel raised her glass. to second chances, and to lessons learned, Maurice added. Donald, slightly tipsy, chimed in, to the best revenge story that ended up not being about revenge at all. I caught Mark's eye across the table. He nodded slightly, understanding passing between us. Actually, I said, standing up, I have one last surprise. I nodded to Elena, who dimmed the lights. On the restaurant's wall, a projector flickered to life, showing a video I'd discovered in Dad's old files. To my children, Dad's voice filled the room. If you're watching this, you've either succeeded brilliantly or failed spectacularly. Either way, remember, business is business, but family is everything. Mark's hand found mine in the darkness. We got there eventually, he whispered. Better late than never. The video ended with Mom and Dad smiling at the camera, young and hopeful, standing in front of their first office. As the lights came up, I saw tears in Rachel's eyes. They'd be so happy right now. They are, I said, touching my mother's pendant. Somewhere. Morris raised his glass one final time. To the future of Swanson Meridian Technologies. No, Mark and I said simultaneously. We looked at each other, surprised, then laughed. To family, we corrected together. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove ourselves worthy of our parents' legacy. But tonight, watching Mark chat easily with our old friends, seeing the pride in Rachel's eyes, feeling the weight of Mom's pendant against my heart, I knew we'd finally found our way home. Sometimes the best endings aren't about winning or losing. They're about finding what was lost and building something stronger from the pieces.
My name is Allison White. I am 32 years old and work as a senior manager at Prescott International. My sister, Lucy, is 35 years old and a mother to 4-year-old twins, while my younger sister, Sophia, is 29 years old with a 6-month-old baby. Yes, life is ironic. Lucy got married right after graduating from university and chose the path of a typical housewife. Sophia is a freelance graphic designer, working from home while raising her child. And I have built my career in a 50-story office building in Manhattan. While others were building families, I spent my life buried in spreadsheets and in meeting rooms. That was my choice. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back, this choice had been gradually shaped over time. Although my parents were keen on education, they couldn't afford to send all 3 daughters to private universities. They paid all of Lucy's private university tuition. But when it was my turn, the situation changed dramatically. Allison, I'm sorry, we can't afford your fees. Sophia is next. I still remember my mother's apologetic face. They had spent their savings on Lucy's tuition, and for Sophia they managed through educational loans and scholarships. But don't worry. Allison, you can get scholarships. True to their words, I won scholarships for high achievers. I covered the shortfall with another scholarship, delivering newspapers and tutoring. While my sisters enjoyed shopping with friends on weekends, I studied in the library and worked at a drugstore at night. That had become my normal routine. My days started with delivering newspapers at 5 a.m. While cycling through the residential area, I reviewed the previous day's lectures aloud. From 8 a.m. I was in the library writing reports, and after afternoon lectures, I went to my tutoring job. I averaged 4 hours of sleep. Allison, what about the upcoming exam? One day, Sophia burst into my room crying. She struggled with math, so I cut my own study time to tutor her. I bought a whiteboard, installed it in my room, and conducted 2-hour one-on-one sessions every night. As a result, Sophia passed her exam with flying colors. Lucy's relationship advice always started late at night. He hasn't contacted me. It seems like he went out with a female friend. Seeing my sister's tear-streaked face, I couldn't ignore her, even with an early morning newspaper delivery day coming up. Sometimes I even mediated between Lucy and her boyfriend. I accompanied my grandmother to the doctor twice a month. There were days I had to miss university. Having Allison with me makes me feel safe, my grandmother used to say. Those words always warmed my heart. I read lecture notes in the waiting room, awaiting the doctor's call. I consistently maintained top grades. How do you do it? Even when friends asked, I didn't have an answer. Perhaps striving for my family was my motivation. Allison is smart, she'll find her own way, my mother often said. Behind those words might have been the implicit expectation, so take care of the others. In reality, I had been the family's problem solver since my student days. My mother's words were both a source of pride and a heavy responsibility for me. This role as the family's problem solver had become part of my identity. I couldn't have imagined how it would affect my later life. On my desk, there's a family photo taken at my parents' silver wedding anniversary. My father, Robert, a gentleman, was a math teacher at a local high school. My mother, Debbie, a passionate woman, ran a small flower shop. In the photo, they were smiling happily. Next to it was a photo with my grandmother, Helen. When I was young, my grandmother often looked after us. Now at 85, her legs have weakened, and she needs assistance in her daily life. Yet her wisdom and kindness remain unchanged. One Friday afternoon, as I was preparing for an important meeting, my phone on my desk rang. It was Lucy. Allison, I need to talk to you. Her voice, usually cheerful, carried a note of caution this time. It's about our parents' 35th wedding anniversary. Sophia and I came up with a great idea. I looked up from the documents and leaned back in my chair. What is it? A family trip to Hawaii. 2 weeks during the Christmas break. The kids will be out of school, and it's perfect timing. I began to do the math in my head. Hawaii, Christmas season, the whole family. It seems like it will be quite expensive, I noted. Yes, that's why we thought the three of us could share the costs as a gift for our parents, Lucy suggested. It sounded reasonable. Indeed, our parents had dedicated 35 years to raising us. My ability to attend university was also thanks to their support. They more than deserved this vacation. That sounds good, I agreed. Lucy hesitated before continuing. Actually, I was hoping you could take on a bit more of the burden. More, I asked. Yes. Sophia and I have kids, so we have a lot of expenses. And you're single and earn a high salary, she explained. I was stunned. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. True. I did earn a good salary, but that was the result of years of hard work. I swallowed my words and asked Lucy, how much are we talking about? When Lucy mentioned the figure, I was shocked. It was equivalent to 2 months of my salary. But this was a special occasion. All right. When I agreed, Lucy seemed relieved and hung up the phone. Later, a call from my mother followed. Allison, thanks for the transfer this month. It always helps. And I was wondering if you could contribute a bit more to Grandma's caregiving costs. Your father and I are working hard, but it's still quite expensive, she said. I held back a sigh. My wallet seemed to be an open savings account for my family. I was already covering nearly half of my grandmother's home care costs. My grandmother had been living with my parents for several years now. However, while they claimed to be caring for her as a family, most of the actual caregiving was outsourced. In the midst of this, I was the only one who, despite my work schedule, frequently visited home to check on my grandmother. Considering everything, I couldn't just refuse. Reluctantly, I agreed to Lucy's request for travel funds and my mother's request for increased caregiving costs. I transferred the money to them that same day. After sending the money, I paused for a moment. Next month's rent, car loan, and money for my hobbies all crossed my mind. But as usual, I dismissed these thoughts. That evening, I returned to my apartment after work. As I gazed at the Manhattan skyline, I imagined the vacation in Hawaii, the blue ocean, white sand beaches, and quality time with family. Well, a vacation like that wouldn't be so bad, I muttered to myself. However, the dream didn't last long. A week later, Sophia called. "Allison, I need to ask you something," she said in a tone I already recognized. "I had a feeling something troublesome was coming. It's about Grandma." My stomach sank. My grandmother's condition had recently worsened. She struggled with stairs and needed assistance with bathing and meal preparation. Although she had caregivers visiting 3 times a week, it wasn't enough. While my parents insisted on caring as a family in reality, they were busy and left most of the burden to the caregivers and me. I visited my parents' home 2 to 3 times a week after work. I prepared meals appropriate for my grandmother's health, helped with her medication, and sometimes stayed late into the night. Meanwhile, Lucy and Sophia, citing their busy parenting schedules, hardly visited. "Allison, I want to move into a facility." My grandmother had said this several times. "I don't want to burden you, and I might make some friends of my own age." However, my parents staunchly refused this suggestion. It would look bad. "We should care for our grandmother as a family," they said. Behind these platitudes, the actual care was left to others. Just last weekend, I had visited home and spent time with my grandmother. As usual, I helped with the garden and enjoyed afternoon tea while looking through old albums. "Allison, you always take such good care of me," my grandmother smiled gently. "But you need to take care of your own life too, just like I did when I was young." Looking at photos of her younger years, I thought about the choices she had made in her life. After the war, she worked as a nurse and raised my mother on her own. She was a strong, independent woman. The reality that my grandmother now needed someone to care for her tightened my heart. "Hey, Allison," my grandmother suddenly became serious. "I don't want to take any more of your precious time because of me. I've been looking at brochures for facilities, like this one, which looks wonderful. My body is becoming less mobile, and I can't easily go outside anymore. I hate being bored. And I'm considering starting a new life in a new place to choose my own path." However, our conversation was interrupted by my mother's sudden return home. "Mother, we shouldn't be talking about this. We'll take care of you," she declared firmly. Her resolute attitude then ironically became a different reality now. "Someone has to look after Grandma while everyone is in Hawaii." A silence followed. I already knew the answer. Me. "But I'm supposed to be going on the trip." "I'm sorry, Allison, but there's no one else to look after Grandma. Our parents need a vacation, and Lucy and Sophia have kids." "What about respite care?" I suggested. "A professional care facility could take her for about 2 weeks. She could even socialize with people her age." "No." Sophia's voice suddenly grew firm. "We can't leave Grandma with strangers for 2 weeks. Maybe during the day, but not overnight stays. We're family, Allison. You might not understand, but we need to take care of our own." Those words struck me. Family. It had always been the magic word that moved me. Yes, this was a pattern that had continued for years, starting back in university. When I was a junior, Lucy suddenly decided to marry. "I'm getting married to Ryan," she announced after just 3 months of dating. Amidst our parents' worried looks, Lucy began dreaming aloud. A church wedding, a pure white dress, live music. "I want a beautiful wedding," she pleaded through tears. However, our parents couldn't afford to pay for everything. Then Lucy came to my room. "Allison, please. You're the only one I can rely on. We're family," she implored tearfully. As always, I had to help a family member in tears. I lent her my newspaper delivery job earnings for the dress. The ceremony indeed turned out to be wonderful. But then, the bills started coming to me. 2 years later, Sophia made a sudden decision. "I'm quitting university to start a graphic design company," she declared. She announced she was starting a design company. Our parents were strongly against it, but Sophia wouldn't listen. "If I don't start now, I'll miss the chance." "I'll definitely succeed," she insisted. I helped with the preparations for launching her company. However, Sophia's company did not take off as expected. Client issues, worsening financials. As expected, the company went bankrupt within a year. What remained was a debt of $20,000. "Allison, help me." Sophia called me in the middle of the night, and I poured all my entry-level salary into her debts. She promised monthly repayments, but those promises were never kept, and that brings us to today. Always bound by the word family, I have supported them in this way. I had sacrificed myself for it. But this time was different. That night, I held a glass of wine, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, thinking, always the dependable one, always fulfilling responsibilities. That had been my role, fulfilling my parents' wishes, supporting my sisters' lives, and now, even caring for my grandmother. But what about my life? I too had dreams and hopes. I pulled out a photo from my drawer. It was from 10 years ago, the day I graduated from university. Next to me in my gown, my parents and sisters smiled proudly. That day, my father told me, "Allison, you are our pride. You will surely lead a wonderful life." Those words became my driving force. But at the same time, they might have become a heavy chain. Meeting family expectations, making them proud, had become my mission. During lunch break, I went out with Michelle, my colleague and only friend who knew this situation. To be honest, Allison, she started. While picking at her salad, Michelle said, "Your family takes it for granted that you will always be there to help. If I were in your shoes, I would have exploded by now. But it's because they're family." "That's exactly why." Michelle interrupted. "Because they're family, you should also value your own life. You're always giving. It's time you learn to receive." Her words pushed me forward. The next morning, I made up my mind. As soon as I arrived at the office, I booked a luxury resort in San Diego, a beachside hotel, for the same 2 weeks as my family's trip to Hawaii. I also arranged my flight tickets. After making the reservations, I told no one in my family. I submitted my vacation notice at work and wrapped up all the necessary handovers. In the weeks leading up to the Christmas break, the calls from my family increased. They discussed travel preparations and detailed instructions for my grandmother's care. I responded to all with understood, but internally, I was progressing with different plans. On the first day of the Christmas break, I quietly left my apartment. My suitcase was packed with summer clothes and swimsuits. I turned off my mobile phone and boarded the plane. Upon arriving in San Diego, the warm California sun welcomed me. The hotel was fantastic. The sunsets visible from my room with an ocean view was breathtaking, and I could read undisturbed on the private beach. The first few days were blissful. I attended yoga classes in the morning, spent afternoons at the spa, and enjoyed delicious meals at nearby restaurants in the evening. It was a luxurious time spent without having to care for anyone or meet anyone's expectations, just enjoying time for myself. On the 4th day, curiosity got the better of me, and I turned on my mobile phone. I was immediately hit by a storm of missed calls and messages. "Lucy, where are you?" "Grandma is alone." "Sophia, I can't believe you would do something so selfish." "Mom, Allison, how could you let us down like this? Call us immediately." "Dad, Allison, what were you thinking? Come back right now." The messages continued, even from relatives. Aunt Susan criticized. "How could you abandon your family?" And Uncle Dan reproached. "You've let your parents down." That wasn't all. Lucy's husband, Ryan, reported, "The kids are crying," and Sophia's husband, William, sent a long, preachy message about valuing family bonds. I took a deep breath and blocked everyone. However, the content of the messages weighed heavily on me. As I sunbathed by the poolside, I began to question whether my actions were right. The only thing that troubled me was leaving my grandmother alone. But why should I always be the one to sacrifice everything? Is it fair that my vacation is taken away because my sisters have families and children? And above all, why wasn't I invited on the trip from the start? They took the travel expenses from me but planned to leave me as the caregiver. Is that really what a family should do? After 2 weeks, when I returned to my apartment, The entire family was waiting for me. They had interrogated Sarah about my travel plans in an almost threatening manner. My mother was crying, my father was trembling with anger, and my sisters were looking at me with eyes full of blame. "Let's hear your explanation," my father demanded. There was a severity in his voice I had never heard in my entire life. "There's nothing to explain," I replied calmly. "I'm also a member of this family. I deserve to enjoy a vacation." "But what about Grandma?" Sophia yelled. "We had to cancel our trip to Hawaii. We even incurred cancellation fees, and the kids were crying," Lucy said. "It was supposed to be a trip to honor our parents. How could you do this to us?" "Yes, it's all my fault," I said sarcastically. "But why wasn't I invited to the trip from the start? Why did you only take my money and plan to leave me as the caregiver?" Silence took over the room. Lucy began but couldn't continue. "We just assumed," Sophia admitted in a low voice. "You've always helped." "Yes, I've always helped." My voice trembled. "I paid for my own university tuition with part-time jobs, managed the costs for Lucy's wedding, and helped Sophia with her debt repayments. But I did it because I love my family, not because it should be taken for granted." "But you're single and don't have a family," my mother said in a low voice. "You have the time and the money." Those words were the last straw. "Don't have a family." My voice trembled. "I do have a family. All of you are my family. But you don't treat me like family. I'm just a convenient tool, a convenient presence for you." "Allison, that's not what we meant," my father began. "I've had enough." I raised my hand. "I've always said yes, always put my own life on hold to fulfill everyone else's wishes. But that ends now." "What are you saying?" Sophia asked. "From today, I'm going to live my life. I'm done living according to everyone else's convenience. If you need help, ask, but don't assume it's my duty. And about Grandma, I've arranged for a nursing home. I've already discussed it with the facility." "How could you?" my mother screamed. "Putting Grandma in a facility?" Lucy's voice quivered. "Yes, I'm putting her in a facility. There are professional staff there, and she can interact with people her own age. There's 24-hour medical care. It's the best choice for Grandma. Much better than shuffling family responsibilities among ourselves. And despite you all knowing she's wanted this, you've been pretending not to know, locking her up because of what people might think." My family was outraged. Words of anger and disappointment flew. My mother broke down crying, my father threatened to disown me, and my sisters accused me of changing. But I was no longer shaken. I entered my apartment alone. Outside the window, the Manhattan skyline shone. Where I used to find solace in that view, now I felt something different. A sense of strength and the anticipation of a new beginning. Weeks passed, and slowly the situation began to change. Initially hostile, my family started to accept the reality. My grandmother was adapting to the facility life better than expected. In the day room, she enjoyed playing cards with other residents, and she loved participating in the painting activities of the activity program. "It's fun here," Allison, my grandmother, told me during my visit. "I never thought I'd make so many friends." My parents, too, gradually began to soften their stance. Especially my father, who started to acknowledge that the care at the facility was truly the best choice for my grandmother. Lucy and Sophia and I hadn't fully reconciled yet, but their aggressive attitudes had subsided. Perhaps they too needed time to reflect on their actions. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. I spent weekends on my hobbies, and I vacation wherever I want. At work, I've become more confident in expressing my opinions. Sometimes, my family tried to revert to old habits. They would ask for emergency babysitting or seek financial help. But I no longer said yes unconditionally. "I'm sorry, but I'm attending an art class this weekend," I told them. "The money I would have spent will go into my savings for the future." Initially, my family was taken aback by such responses. but gradually, they began to respect my boundaries. Surprisingly, this change had a positive impact on my relationships as well. I started interacting more at work and even found myself going on a date. His name was Nathan, an investment banker. He respected my career and understood my family dynamics. Recently, I received a call from my mother. It was a calm conversation, the first in a long time. "Allison, you were right," she said in a quiet voice. "We took you for granted. We should have valued your life and your dreams more." Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were different this time. They were tears of relief and new beginnings. Love is about giving and receiving. But one-sided sacrifice is not love. It took me 32 years to learn this lesson, but it's never too late. Now, there's a new photo on my desk. It's a selfie I took on the beach in San Diego. Next to it, there's a photo of my grandmother at her birthday party at the facility. She's surrounded by new friends, smiling happily. And now I can think about next month's family gathering with a sense of calm. There's no longer the same pressure as before. We're just meeting as equals, as family. Sometimes, life takes unexpected turns. But not all changes are for the worse. Sometimes, the hardest choices bring about the most necessary changes. My decision affected the entire family, but it led to a positive change. We are now building healthier relationships, understanding and respecting each other more. I am Irene, a 30-year-old enjoying my single life. I work in sales at a foreign-owned company. For me, family trips are an annual tradition that provides a special time to rejuvenate my mind and body while reaffirming my bond with my family. My family has decided to visit Hawaii every year, where we relax on the beautiful beaches and savor the fresh local cuisine. This trip has been one of my cherished memories since childhood. Of course, this year too, that season was approaching, and I was looking forward to going to Hawaii with my entire family. However, after the Christmas Eve family party ended and I was cleaning up, my mother abruptly said something that cruelly shattered my expectations. "Irene, I don't think you'll be able to join us for the Hawaii trip this year." I was at a loss for words at the sudden statement. "What do you mean?" When I asked, my mother averted her gaze and began to explain. "This year the budget is tight. It's also partly because you reduced your financial support to Christoph's family a bit." I listened to my mother's words in disbelief. Several years ago, I was informed that my brother Christoph's family was in a difficult financial situation, and thinking of my nephew and niece, I began providing monthly support. Even though I don't have an exceptional income, I've managed to contribute a significant amount to support my family. Even so, being told I couldn't join the trip didn't make sense to me. But I've been sending a considerable amount every month. I thought there was enough to plan a Hawaii trip with that money. My mother showed a troubled expression but said nothing in return. Instead, my father spoke up. "Well, while we were adjusting the plans, certain circumstances arose, and we had no choice but to prioritize Christoph's family." "What circumstances?" I let out a deep sigh. The atmosphere was heavy, and I didn't feel like pressing further. However, anger and questions swirled within me. To begin with, the reason for my brother Christoph's family's financial difficulties was never entirely clear, and my doubts about it were never resolved. Because of that, I had always carried a sense of unease in my heart. That night I stayed alone in my room, deeply lost in thought. Up until now, I had continued to provide financial support for Christoph's family, believing it was for their sake. But why was the money always so insufficient? I had been supporting them while sacrificing my own pleasures and saving by living a frugal life. The money should have been managed by his wife, Colleen, and I didn't think they were spending it on unnecessary things. At that moment, a certain thought crossed my mind. There was one thing that had been bothering me, so I decided to confirm it directly with Christoph. Since I had believed Christoph's words without question and continued my financial support, he had a responsibility to explain the reasons properly. I decided to use my next vacation as an opportunity to meet Christoph and get some answers. The meeting place was a local cafe, a quiet spot where there were no children or family members around. Sitting across the table from me, Christoph looked slightly nervous. "It's been a while, Irene," Christoph said with a smile. "Yes, it has. I have something I want to ask you today." Without returning his smile, I got straight to the point. "Can you tell me how you've been using the money I've sent so far?" Christoph's eyes widened for a moment and he froze as if at a loss for words. "Well, of course, it's for the family, for living expenses, education, and so on. Is that all?" I calmly asked, my sharp gaze piercing Christoph. He flinched and closed his mouth. Sensing his silence, I pressed further. "Christoph, is it true that you've been having an affair?" At those words, the color drained from Christoph's face. His eyes darted nervously for a moment and he bit his lip with a pained expression before muttering in a low voice, "Who told you?" I raised an eyebrow slightly at his question, but quickly responded quietly, "Does it matter who told me? So you are having an affair, aren't you?" I was a bit shocked by the revelation of his infidelity, but I knew I needed to get to the bottom of the money issue, so I continued. "The affair is a problem, but what I want to know is where the money went. I need you to explain in detail how the money I sent for the kids was used. Why is there a shortage of funds?" Christoph remained silent, but I could see the tension clearly running down his back. He seemed torn between confessing and finding a way to dodge the question, but it took a while before he finally spoke. Eventually, with a deep sigh, he began, as if bracing himself. "Yes, I did have an affair, I admit it. But it's over now. There's nothing between us anymore. I'm truly sorry." His voice wavered slightly, making his apology sound less convincing. I stared into his eyes and asked my next question. "And what about my money?" At that, Christoph fell silent again. Finally he spoke, his face contorted. I gave her some. Just a little. I haven't calculated the exact amount. Originally, I intended it to supplement our living expenses, but in the end, part of it." "So you used the money on your affair partner," I said, as if confirming the obvious. Christoph couldn't meet my eyes, staring down instead and muttering vaguely, "It's all over now, really. So, can't you forgive me?" I scoffed lightly, leaning back in my chair with my arms crossed. "Forgive you? The money I sent was for your kids. And you used it without permission on your affair partner? Whether or not I accept your apology is one thing, but forgiving the situation? Not a chance." For a moment, it felt as if the cafe was enveloped in an eerie silence. Then I cut to the heart of the matter. "You said you don't know the exact amount you spent on her. Was it around $10,000? More than that?" Christoph's face grew even paler, and in a strained voice he replied, "Maybe. Around that. It's possible." "It's possible? Don't you feel ashamed using such vague language?" I showed no mercy, though little by little, without even realizing, the money just drained away, like a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Christoph looked up, unable to hold it in anymore. "I know, but don't blame me like this. I regret it too." "Do you think you don't deserve the blame? Have you even thought about how Colleen feels? Or your family?" My voice was no longer just angry. It carried a detached, almost cold indifference. "You've lost something far greater than money. Trust. Do you even understand how high that cost is?" Christoph's face twisted bitterly as he sank into his chair, shoulders slumping. "Colleen already knows. Divorce has come up." His words softened my expression for a brief moment, but I quickly steeled myself again. "Then, this is where the conversation ends. I won't be sending you any more money. You'll have to figure things out on your own." "Wait, Irene, please!" Christoph reached out in a panic, his voice desperate as he pleaded. If you suddenly cut me off like this, I don't know what will happen to my family. There's still a chance to fix things." I raised my hand to stop him. "There's no point in talking further. The money I sent, what it was used for, and the result, that's the situation we're in now. That's enough. From here on out, you need to take responsibility for yourself." Leaving those words heavy with meaning, I stood up. As I walked away, I made a firm decision in my heart. There was no way I could tolerate my hard-earned money being used for such irresponsible actions. About a week before my meeting with Christophe, his affair had been discovered by Colleen. One day, she happened to find an intimate message on Christophe's smartphone. Fueled by suspicion, Colleen confronted him, and one piece of evidence after another surfaced. With no way out, Christophe confessed to everything. The details and duration of the affair shattered Colleen's trust entirely, and her anger surpassed anything I could have imagined. No matter how many times Christophe apologized, Colleen's anger and despair ran deep, and the damage to their relationship couldn't be undone. Even so, Christophe desperately tried to repair the situation. He apologized repeatedly, begged for forgiveness, but not a shred of trust remained in Colleen's heart. As time passed, Colleen's resolve hardened, and she ultimately decided to divorce him. It was a few months ago when Colleen confided in me about Christophe's affair. With a somber expression, she began, "Lately, Christophe's been acting strangely cold and suspicious." As I listened, she revealed her concerns about his habit of hiding his phone and the sudden increase in his late returns home. Although surprised, I listened carefully, supporting her as she expressed her anxiety and anger. Since no concrete evidence had been found yet, I had hoped Colleen was simply overthinking things. However, with Christophe's affair proven to be true, I could not forgive him. The fact that my money had been given to his affair partner was also deeply upsetting. From that day on, I began to slowly regain my composure and made an effort to sort out my feelings. The love I felt for Colleen, my nephew, and my niece clashed with the disappointment I had in Christophe, leading to countless sleepless nights. Each time, I felt an overwhelming heaviness in my heart and could do nothing but turn my thoughts over and over in my mind. As I gradually confronted that pain, I decided to focus on my work. It seemed like the only way to shift my mindset. I wanted even just a little to ease the burden on my heart. From then on, I threw myself into my work, feeling a growing sense of clarity as I immersed myself in my duties. Forcing myself to stay motivated through my tasks, I eventually began to think more calmly and rationally about everything. A few weeks later, I made a firm decision. I would stop supporting Christophe financially. I felt a deep sense of guilt toward Colleen, my nephew, and my niece, but I knew I had no other choice. I spent several days with lingering doubts about whether my decision had been the right one. One day, an important meeting at my workplace added another layer of stress. The meeting's agenda was about financial issues with a partner company. Since external dealings were involved, the matter was complex and required a very delicate approach. Feeling a strong sense of responsibility for my role, I poured all my energy into preparing for it. During the meeting, when I heard Christophe's company's name come up, I felt a momentary pang of tension, but I maintained a calm exterior and stated my opinion. For companies that are dependent on the funding we provide, we need to conduct even more thorough risk evaluations. In particular, cases where financial transparency is lacking should be closely scrutinized. My statement had not explicitly named Christophe's company. However, there were undoubtedly those who understood the implications of my words. My company was Christophe's company's largest client, and the relationship between the two was critical to the operations of both businesses. If my company were to halt its funding, Christophe's company would face significant consequences, making it difficult to recover. Unless the issue was fully resolved, the future of Christophe's company would inevitably remain bleak. Even Christoph himself seemed aware of his company's precarious situation. Through office rumors and frequent meetings held by his superiors, he could sense that things were not going well. The company's operations were not running smoothly, and its financial problems were becoming increasingly severe by the day. Rumors began to circulate that their relationships with key clients, which had been a lifeline, were starting to crack. It became clear that these rumors were likely true, and Christoph couldn't ignore their growing reality. Troubled by issues at home, Christoph found himself further cornered by the worsening state of his company, with no idea how to turn things around. That day, upon returning from a sales trip, Christoph was greeted by his visibly flustered subordinates. Their faces betrayed a clear sense of unease and urgency about the grim situation they knew lay ahead. It was hardly surprising, as there was no trace of optimism within Christoph's company. Problems continued to surface like ripples spreading on water, one after another. "Mr. Christophe, we've got a serious problem. We've received a notice from one of our major clients stating that the renewal of our funding agreement is currently on hold. They haven't provided details, but it's been suggested that there may be concerns about our reliability." Christophe was stunned. Even losing a single client would have serious repercussions for their operations. Among them, my company was an especially critical partner. Find out the details immediately. Contact the person in charge and get a full grasp of the situation. Meanwhile, I understood the weight of the responsibility I bore for proposing a suspension of dealings. It was clear that Christophe's company was on the verge of collapse, but I carefully maintained a boundary between emotions and business. A few days later, I reached out to Christoph again. It wasn't just a personal issue between siblings. I felt a formal discussion from a business perspective was necessary. "Christoph, I want to meet and talk again. Let me know the time and place that works for you." Christoph sighed as he read my message, torn as he typed his reply. "Got it. How about the same cafe this weekend?" On the day of our meeting, we faced each other again in the cafe, the tension between us even heavier than before. The fatigue on Christophe's face was evident, and I could tell at a glance that he was cornered. "I came today to talk about work as well," I said bluntly, diving straight in. "I've heard that your company is struggling with cash flow." Christophe frowned, lowering his voice as he responded. "That's true. But what's the point of bringing it up now? You're not planning to help, are you?" "I'm not here to help," I replied firmly. "I wanted you to understand the standards our company uses to determine whether to continue a business relationship, and I think you need to take a much more serious look at why you're failing to meet those standards." At my words, Christophe fell silent. "You can't keep relying on money and connections to fix things anymore." "As your family, that's all I can say." I spoke plainly, then left the cafe. What direction Christophe's life would take from this moment was still uncertain. The outcomes awaiting him were unclear, and the consequences of his choices would now be determined by his own decisions and responsibilities. This moment became a pivotal reminder for me of the weight of personal accountability. While the fate of Christophe's company was significant, my thoughts were mostly consumed by the family he had shattered as a result of his affair. I couldn't stop thinking about the future of my nephew and niece, who had been affected by the fallout of the affair and impending divorce. I couldn't simply ignore Christophe's behavior, knowing there must be a way to prevent their future from being destabilized by an irresponsible person. I realized that if no action was taken, more victims would continue to emerge. A few days later, a change came into my own life. My efforts and achievements were recognized, and I was promoted to department manager. As a manager, I now carried greater responsibilities than ever before and found myself in situations where I had to make even more critical decisions in my daily work. However, I was determined to face these responsibilities head-on without running away. One day, while reviewing an important document at work, something caught my eye. The contents highlighted how crucial my decision-making would be for future operations. It was related to a contract with the small business where Christophe worked. The document detailed the mutually beneficial relationship we had built over the past several years. But upon closer examination, I began to question whether this business relationship was truly justifiable. The next morning, I convened an urgent meeting with the legal and accounting departments to request a thorough audit of our dealings with Christophe's company. We must make decisions purely based on business logic, without any influence from personal ties, I firmly stated. My colleagues agreed with my stance and immediately set the necessary actions in motion. The results of the investigation confirmed my suspicions. Christophe's company was struggling financially, and it was revealed that some payments were overdue. This cannot be overlooked, the head of the legal department said emphatically. Considering their circumstances, this situation could negatively impact our company if left unaddressed. We should proceed with renegotiating the contract immediately. I nodded firmly. Let's proceed with steps towards suspending our transactions. However, please ensure the other party is given a reasonable grace period. As a result, Christophe's company lost its critical support from my company, their primary client. Christophe received this news the following day. Christophe panicked and immediately called me. Irene, why would you do this? Suspending the contract like this? This is business. It wasn't a decision made based on personal feelings. If your company had been managed properly, this wouldn't have happened. I can't believe how cold you've become. We're family. Being family doesn't mean I'll overlook dishonesty or irresponsible behavior. I made the right decision as a department manager. A manager. I hadn't mentioned it, had I? I was promoted to department manager recently. I didn't know. I had no idea you were in such a position. Christophe fell silent, at a loss for words. My unwavering resolve and the harsh reality left him with no escape. Our company's decision to suspend the contract with Christophe's company was a painful but necessary choice to protect the interests of both sides. However, the decision caused greater repercussions than anticipated, quickly spreading to other business partners. In the industry, trust is paramount, and once lost, it is incredibly difficult to regain. Rumors spread rapidly, and Christophe's company found itself losing orders from clients one after another. As a result, cash flow worsened, and delays in paying employee salaries began to affect the entire operation. Moreover, securing new clients became nearly impossible, and the company's reputation hit rock bottom. The decision we made was the catalyst that pushed Christophe's company toward a financial crisis. Additionally, the public exposure of his affair led to unavoidable legal proceedings regarding the divorce. With custody and living arrangements for my nephew and niece becoming increasingly complicated, Christophe seemed to finally grasp the gravity of the consequences his reckless actions had caused. Meanwhile, I began exploring alternative ways to support my nephew and niece so they wouldn't have to bear further uncertainty. I decided to set up a trust account specifically for their educational expenses, taking direct control of its management. This ensured that the funds couldn't be misused by Christophe, and that the money would be properly allocated for its intended purpose. Furthermore, I decided to enroll Christophe's children in an educational support program offered through my company. This would provide them with more opportunities and expand their future options as much as possible. In this way, I found a way to impose direct consequences on Christophe while still providing the minimum level of support as a family member. I am confident that this decision was the right one. However, Christophe's situation continued to deteriorate. Desperate to rebuild his company, Christophe worked tirelessly alongside his colleagues. Yet reality was unforgiving, and despite their efforts, his company was unable to recover from its financial struggles, eventually facing bankruptcy. After the company collapsed, Christophe encountered even greater challenges. No matter how hard he tried to repair his relationship with Colleen and regain his family's trust, her feelings remained unchanged. Eventually, their divorce was finalized. Christophe was heartbroken, overwhelmed with regret for losing the family that once meant so much to him. Then came another blow. He learned that full custody of his children had been awarded to Colleen. Losing his children filled Christoph with sorrow, regret, and a deep sense of loneliness. The peaceful days he had once shared with his family became distant memories, while the harshness of his current reality loomed mercilessly before him. News of Christoph's affair and divorce reached our parents as well, and they decided to disown him. They didn't ask why Christoph had chosen to engage in the affair. For them, losing custody of their grandchildren felt like losing the children themselves, leaving them deeply disappointed. The parents who had once supported him warmly now chose to step away from him entirely. Faced with this cold reality, Christoph was overwhelmed by feelings of powerlessness and regret. No matter how many apologies he offered, his family's trust could not be restored, and he found himself isolated in despair. As for me, I chose to move forward, refusing to be consumed by the family's problems. I took time to reflect on myself and decided to take a new step, leaving my family home to live on my own. Though leaving the familiar comfort of family life was bittersweet, I felt that establishing an independent life in a new environment was something I needed to do. When I first moved my belongings into my new apartment, I realized that this was my own space, a fresh start, and the first step toward carving out my own life. The new days ahead would come with challenges, but I believed they would also bring growth. On top of that, after several years, I found myself in a relationship again. My boyfriend is the calm and thoughtful type I've been longing for, someone who truly understands and supports me. The time we spend together is always fulfilling. At work, I continue to excel as a department manager, contributing to the company's success and generating results. Through my daily life, I've learned to value myself and rediscover the joys of life. In my heart, I feel a growing sense of hope, filled with new possibilities. Now, I look forward to the future I am building with my own hands. I want to be able to repay my parents for their kindness. The reason I began to think this way was due to the efforts and love I felt from my parents during my childhood. Despite not being wealthy, they managed to find the money for my education and worked hard to support my future. In response, I made every effort, and after graduating from high school, I aimed for a private university, but there were financial constraints. Nevertheless, my parents explored scholarships and educational loans to support me. I focused on my studies, aiming for a merit-based scholarship, and at university, I was able to reduce the financial burden on my family as a scholarship student. Yet my parents still helped with part of the food, rent, and material costs. After progressing to higher education, I balanced my studies with part-time jobs and maintained my grades until graduation. When I received a job offer from a leading foreign company after graduating from university, I felt like I was finally starting to repay my parents for their efforts. The desire to give back to my parents with my own efforts became the driving force for my new life, but my workplace was at a foreign company that was highly competitive, and the pressure to perform was a daily burden. In my first year, I made many mistakes and was often scolded by my boss. Despite this, I continued to work hard, supported by the thought of doing my best for my family. As I became accustomed to the work and found efficient ways to produce results, I gained the trust of my seniors and supervisors. By the time I had been with the company for 5 years, I had been promoted to team leader and was entrusted with projects. Thanks to my efforts, I consistently ranked high in performance evaluations and had opportunities for pay raises and promotions. Over time, I was gradually able to build a comfortable financial cushion by saving diligently for 10 years. One day in the 10th year, I suddenly felt a strong desire to show my gratitude to my parents in a tangible way. By that time, my income had stabilized and my savings were close to the target amount. What I had in mind was a plan to gift my parents a new house. They had lived for a long time in an old single-family home that was falling apart everywhere. I wanted to free them from that daily life and provide a comfortable living environment. My concern was that my younger sister had been causing trouble for our parents. She had been spoiled as the second daughter from a young age and had grown into an adult who could not stand on her own, living off our parents. Although it was also my parents' choice not to forcibly separate her from them, I still wanted to repay them in some way. So I started researching to find the best house. I looked for properties mainly in the area where my parents had lived for many years, selecting some candidates with good access to public transport, convenient shopping, and close to hospitals. On weekends, I visited real estate agencies, repeated model room visits and viewings, and aimed to find a property that would meet my parents' wishes as much as possible. After selecting several properties as candidates, when I finally found the ideal house, I promptly proceeded with the purchase. The house was south-facing with good sunlight, featuring a spacious living room and a kitchen equipped with the latest facilities. Furthermore, the layout allowed for private spaces for both my father and mother on the second floor, with modifications possible for future caregiving. I was confident that I could provide a living environment that was easy for my parents to use and live in safely. To be honest, equipping it with all these facilities cost considerably more than I had imagined. Although I felt temporarily relieved after paying the down payment, the reality of having to make monthly mortgage repayments inevitably weighed heavily on my life. Nonetheless, even faced with this reality, I felt no regret. Instead, I felt a greater sense of fulfillment that I had been able to reach a moment where my efforts, planned and built up step by step, were finally rewarded. When I told my parents about the purchase of the new house, they were initially surprised and could not believe it. My father, especially, asked repeatedly, "Are you really sure?" while showing an undeniable smile, which I still remember. My mother also looked incredulous, repeatedly gazing at the house's photos and tearfully saying, "I never thought I could live in such a splendid house," and simply said, "Thank you." Seeing my parents truly happy was the best reward for me, and I was once again convinced that this choice was not a mistake. I felt a warmth in my heart as I realized that my efforts had finally reached them in a concrete form. The preparation for the move went smoothly, and their new life started. Every time I saw my parents sitting in the living room of the new house, looking comfortable and happy, I felt happy too. This prompted me to approach my own life with even more positivity. However, the beginning of this hopeful new life gradually came with a sense of discomfort. Initially, I watched my parents live in the new house while steadily continuing to make mortgage repayments. The monthly payments were by no means small, but I encouraged myself by thinking, "This is my way of giving back to them." However, the opportunities to be thanked for my efforts gradually decreased, and it began to feel like an expected duty. As my job became busier, the time I could see my parents decreased. Eventually, I heard that my sister was frequently visiting my parents' house. Curious, I called her. "Have you been going to Mom and Dad's house every day recently? What about your apartment?" I asked. Then, unexpectedly, she replied, "I've moved out of the apartment. I've decided to live with them from now on." What? Why so suddenly? Well, there were various things. Anyway, that's the situation, she said lightly, and I was momentarily at a loss for words. The fact that my sister was also living in the house I had bought for my parents somehow felt off, and a small unease grew within me. After all, I wondered how much she really understood the responsibility I had carried, the inner conflicts that came with it, and the decision I had made solely for our parents' sake. Moreover, the fact that my parents had not informed me in advance about my sister moving into the house also felt unsettling. Even a single word of consultation might have made me feel differently. I mulled over in my head. In that moment, I felt as if my existence was reduced to merely providing money, weighing heavily on my heart. Since my sister started living with my parents, an unsettling restlessness continued in my heart. This is especially true every time my parents told me how naturally my sister had adapted to living in the new house, as if she had always lived there. Hearing that, a small discomfort slowly spread in the depths of my heart. It was hard to describe this feeling as either jealousy or anger. It was slightly different from either emotion, a complex sentiment that couldn't be easily put into words. Feeling unable to sort out my feelings, I decided to visit my parents' house the next weekend. Once there, I saw my sister relaxing and watching TV in the living room, and I sat down beside her. Then, seizing the moment, I decided to voice the question that had been lingering in my mind. "Hey, why did you move out of your apartment? Did Mom and Dad say something to you?" My sister answered nonchalantly with a slight smile. "Because I was having a tough time with money. Mom and Dad said I could live here, and I thought you would naturally agree." At that moment, the small discomfort in my chest swelled suddenly and pressed down heavily. It seemed that I had been completely left out of this discussion between my parents and my sister. Her words intensified the discomfort inside me. When I bought this house, it involved considerable effort and sacrifice. I could finally acquire the house after long hours of overtime and working on holidays. Yet, within the family, it seemed natural for my sister to live here, a notion I simply could not accept. Why allow my sister to live here without considering me, the investor? It's not that my sister was at fault. She was merely following our parents' words. But to me, this house wasn't just a building. It was the embodiment of my efforts and a symbol of my pride. That's why I felt resistance to sharing it easily even with my sister. Therefore, I decided to ask my parents as well. "Mom, I heard Nicole is living here now, but why didn't you tell me anything?" When I asked, my mother began to speak with an awkward expression. "Because you seemed busy. I thought I shouldn't trouble you with it." These words left me feeling helpless. Busy as I was, I regretted not being involved in this important decision. I also talked to my father. "It's natural to help each other because we're family," he said clearly. I felt frustrated that I couldn't argue with that. Indeed, maybe it's because we're family that we should support each other. However, it felt like my burdens and feelings as the one supporting them were being overlooked, leaving me dissatisfied. Weeks after my sister and parents started living together, I noticed a gradual change in the atmosphere at home. Despite being often at home, my sister did not help with household chores and was mostly uninvolved. She seemed to be relaxing in her room most of the time and contributed nothing to the household expenses, despite having a job. This situation continued, with her contributing nothing to the house's expenses, and I couldn't help feeling discontent. The unease inside me only grew. It seemed an uncomfortable feeling had taken root within me. One day, compounded by stress at work, I finally expressed my feelings to my sister. "Honestly, have you ever considered how hard I worked to buy that house? I'm still paying the mortgage, yet you contribute nothing to the living expenses and don't even seem to be looking for a new apartment. It feels like my efforts are being ignored, and honestly, it's tough." My sister looked surprised, and after a moment of silence, she spoke in a small voice. "I didn't know you felt that way, but buying the house was your decision, and it's hard for everyone, so I was just overwhelmed with my own issues." Hearing this, I realized why I had exploded with emotion. I wanted my sister to understand the thoughts and efforts I had put into that house, and to acknowledge them. Through this incident with my sister and parents, I deeply felt the importance of boundaries in family relationships. Just because we are family, we should not take sharing everything for granted but build our relationship while respecting each other's efforts and feelings. I don't know how my relationship with my sister will change in the future. However, by gradually expressing the frustrations I had been holding inside, I might be able to rebuild my relationship with her. But that day marked a turning point in my life. My parents hosted a housewarming party. The fact that I was not invited was the beginning. Had it not been for that event, I might not have experienced such deep pain and loneliness. But reality was harsh and merciless. About a month ago, I had heard from my parents that they were planning a housewarming party. At that time, I felt nothing. "The house is new, so let's celebrate grandly," they said, and I naturally agreed and planned to adjust my schedule to attend. However, days passed, and I received no information about when it would be held. Having expected to be invited, I started to feel uneasy. About 2 weeks ago, during a long overdue visit home, I noticed something different about the time I spent with my family. My parents, who used to laugh and chat often, now seemed a bit cold. My sister's gaze was sharp, and I continued to ignore it. Even though I felt this discomfort, I thought it might just be my imagination. However, the lack of communication confirmed my suspicions, and I decided to take action. One afternoon, I hesitated but ultimately decided to go to my parents' house. I didn't call or message them in advance. When I rang the doorbell and entered the house without any prior notice, I found it bustling. My parents and sister were busy preparing decorations and arranging catering. I approached my sister, who was nearby. "What are you doing?" "What does it look like? We're preparing for the housewarming party. The guests will arrive soon," she replied. I was stunned and managed to say, "I didn't get any notification." She responded coldly, "We didn't send one. Do we need to invite you? Your role is over." I was speechless at her ruthlessness, and a chilling sensation enveloped my heart. Instinctively, I asked, "What?" But my sister's eyes were looking somewhere far away. My parents were looking in my direction. Both spoke to me with indifferent expressions, without lifting their faces. "We've raised you and paid your university tuition, so this is the least you can do," they said. Those words spread an indescribable chill through my heart. It was as if they were saying I was no longer needed. Then, my sister coldly declared, "Your role is finished. Get out of the house." Her words echoed in my ears and pierced my heart. The cold expression on my sister's face and her words seemed meaningless, or was it just me who felt that way? My parents, too, were there, laughing and saying nothing. I couldn't suppress the rising anger and sadness inside me. The frustration of having spent 10 years working hard and making sacrifices for my family, only to be treated as if it were all meaningless, was indescribable. However, I did not show my feelings outwardly. At that moment, a decision formed in my heart. I had come this far without letting my family know that I was the owner of the house, but there was no reason to remain silent any longer. Right then, I took out the deed to the house and presented it in front of them. "I am the owner of this house, and I have no intention of changing that. I've been paying all the mortgage for this house. You've been living here because I allowed it," I declared firmly. The faces of my parents and sister contorted. My sister tried to argue, but I cut her off. "If you intend to kick me out, it's simple. You are the ones who will leave this house." They looked at me incredulously, but I continued without flinching, expressing my determination. "If you want to continue living here, you should have at least shown some gratitude, but that chance is gone. I will no longer be your sacrifice." Afterward, I formally notified them through a lawyer that they had to vacate the house, and I gave them a grace period to leave. Naturally, my parents and sister begged and yelled various emotions at me, but I did not change my mind. I reminded myself that this was a necessary step for me to move forward in life. Eventually, they had no choice but to leave the house. After they were evicted, my sister went around to our relatives' houses, spewing complaints and insults about me. She suddenly kicked us out of the house, she repeatedly claimed, portraying themselves as unfairly treated. However, our relatives gradually began to realize the truth. The fact that my sister had moved out of her apartment without planning ahead, and that the entire family had been taking it for granted to rely on me, came to light. Additionally, it became known that I had taken on a decade's worth of effort and a substantial mortgage to buy the house and support the family's lifestyle. The inconsistency between my sister's claims and my actions led the relatives to eventually distrust her story. Some of them even reached out to me to hear my side of the situation. I explained the circumstances of the house purchase and the attitudes of my parents and sister calmly and without emotion. As a result, the relatives agreed with my stance and were critical of my parents and sister for depending on me excessively and lacking gratitude. My sister's actions resulted in the family becoming isolated, a consequence of these facts becoming known to others. As I severed ties with my family, they became isolated from our relatives as well. Following this, my parents and sister found themselves in severe financial difficulty. At first, my mother struggled with managing living expenses and sought help from relatives. However, the response they got was cold, and they were mostly alienated due to their selfish actions. Both my sister and father also received little support from our relatives. My mother repeatedly apologized to me in tears, but I did not respond. Since that day, I have blocked all contact with my parents and sister. The bond that once existed in our family, known for its mutual support among relatives, completely collapsed as a mere result of ruthless actions. Nevertheless, I did not step back but moved steadily forward to the next step. After stopping the mortgage payments, I immediately contacted professionals and started the process of selling the house. After ensuring there were no legal issues, I assessed the condition and value of the house and prepared it for the market. This decision marks a new beginning for me. I reaffirmed to myself repeatedly, I cannot reclaim the past. However, I understood that I needed to take action for my current self in order to envision a future. The event that would change my life by 180 degrees began with a piece of news I stumbled upon one day. It was a report that the real estate market was unexpectedly booming, and the land value in the area where I had bought my house was rising sharply. When I heard this information, it felt as if a current had run through my mind. Until then, I had never deeply considered the value of the house I owned. It was something I had purchased merely to provide a comfortable living space for my family. A few days later, when I received the appraisal results, I couldn't believe my eyes. The house could be sold for about 10% more than the purchase price. Moreover, due to the high demand for houses in the area, it was possible that the selling price could increase even further depending on the conditions. This news filled me with hope that the difficult days I had endured were beginning to fade. I didn't hesitate to decide to sell, and I swiftly began the preparations. There was a mountain of tasks to be done: organizing documents, inspecting the house, negotiating with real estate agents. But my hands moved quickly through all the tasks. Weeks passed, and the day to complete the sale of the house arrived. That morning, I held the documents in my hand and quietly left the house alone. I felt that the person reflected in my family's eyes was no longer the person I used to be. To them, I must have appeared as a heartless person. However, they couldn't understand how deeply their actions had wounded me. I had firmly vowed to act ruthlessly to cut ties with the past and walk towards a new future. The final selling price of the house was about 15% higher than the initial purchase price, a result that exceeded expectations. With that money in hand, I first paid off the long-standing mortgage in full, achieving financial freedom. Meanwhile, I heard from relatives that my parents and sister were still struggling to find a new home. Without substantial funds, it was difficult for them to secure a decent residence. My mother began to receive harsh words from relatives and neighbors, such as wasting her daughter's efforts, and losing an important house for their own selfish desires, losing the peaceful days she once had. These criticisms became a severe social pressure unlike anything she had experienced before, eating away at her heart. My sister, somewhat aware that her irresponsible behavior was to blame, remained unable to admit her faults. Moreover, her spending habits hadn't changed, and my parents were at their wits' end. The pensions my parents received were not enough to support even a modest lifestyle, especially with a spendthrift like my sister increasing the burden. Unable to stop spending on expensive clothes and hobbies, and with living expenses often falling short, the little savings my parents had gradually began to run out. Even when asked to save, my sister's casual attitude of, "It'll be fine," remained unchanged, further increasing the burden on my parents. Faced with this situation, my parents had to return to work to supplement their living expenses. However, the jobs available to them in their old age were limited, and my mother had to take up unfamiliar part-time work while my father was forced into physically demanding light labor. Despite this, my sister's continued spending meant that the balance between income and expenses was always unstable, making life increasingly difficult. Family relations grew more strained, and my parents, losing their emotional and physical reserves, often argued, while my sister showed no real consideration for the causes. The cumulative burden of her spending eventually depleted my parents' retirement funds, and financial worries became a regular part of their daily lives. The distortions that had been present in the household finally surfaced, but with no way to repair them, the relationship between my parents and my sister only grew more hostile. The stability built through the purchase of the house collapsed, leaving behind only scenes of each pushing heavy responsibilities onto the other. The actions they had once taken against me had indeed come back to haunt them. As I reflected on the time and effort I had dedicated for the sake of my family, I did not look back. I had chosen to live a life for myself at last. In my new residence, I arranged the interior to my liking, creating a comfortable space. While dedicating myself to my work, I enjoyed my hobbies and interactions with new friends in my free time. Now freed from a family that only sought to use me, I had finally attained true freedom and peace. Again, that email. Tracy stared at her phone screen, letting out a deep sigh. The new email from her mother danced with the usual words: family gathering. Conversations with her mother always seemed to run on predetermined tracks, inevitably heading in the same direction. Sometimes it was about the weekend family gathering where Tracy was expected to bring a dish. Other times it was a request to help with the pick-up and drop-off of her niece and nephew. Tracy, this coming Sunday, we're all getting together. Opening the email from her mother, Tracy had already predicted the coming scenario. Indeed, family gatherings had been increasing lately. Since her siblings had children, Diane had been finding more reasons to call the family together. "You're making your homemade meatloaf, right? It was so delicious last time." Before replying, a deep sigh escaped. Indeed, the meatloaf Tracy brought last time was well received, but it had taken 3 hours to prepare. This weekend, Tracy has a deadline of a project looming. "Sorry, I'm swamped with work this week." "Oh, work again?" It was the same last time. Even through the screen, Tracy could sense her mother's disappointment. Next came a drawing from her niece Emma, to Auntie. It was scribbled unevenly. "Emma really wants to see you, Auntie Tracy. It would be nice if you could help with her ballet class rides." Yes. This was her mother's strategy, sending pictures and videos of her nieces and nephews, their drawings, and trying to increase her chances of taking care of them. Tracy closed her phone. Her eyes went to the kitchen calendar. Next weekend's schedule was marked in red pen as family meeting. Ultimately, Tracy would end up making the meatloaf, working late into the night, yet waking up early on Sunday to prepare the meatloaf. Seeing the smiles of her niece and nephew was indeed healing. But her parents and siblings always left small scars on her. One day, when Tracy's phone rang at 3 p.m., she was in the middle of a client meeting at the architectural firm. Right before an important design presentation, she hesitated for a moment, seeing her mother's name on the display. The same old interactions, Tracy wondered. "Urgent. Call me back immediately. There's an important family discussion." Tracy politely excused herself to the clients and stepped into the hallway. Her mother's voice was excitedly high-pitched. "Tracy, great news. Your father and I have planned our 50th wedding anniversary party. We've booked Le Ciel at the Grand Plaza Hotel. The whole family will celebrate." Tracy's stomach sank a little. Le Ciel was the most upscale French restaurant in the city, with a waiting list of several months. She and her husband, Matt, tried to book for their anniversary 2 years ago, but gave up after being told it was a 6-month wait. "That's amazing, Mom. But the reservation?" "Jenny's friend Kate is close with the restaurant's sommelier." Her mother continued, cutting her off. "Thanks to her, we secured a private room for 6 weeks from now on a Saturday. The cost will be split among the family. It'll be around $500 per person." Tracy did the math in her head. $1,000 for Matt and her. Not cheap, but a reasonable amount for her parents' 50th anniversary. She could easily cover it with her bonus she received last month, thanks to a major project. "Okay, Mom, we'll be there." There was a pause on the other end. Tracy instantly understood what that silence meant. That characteristic pause when her mother was about to say something. Tracy, actually." Her mother's voice suddenly became quieter. "The restaurant does not allow children under 12. Could you and Ben take care of Jenny and Richard's kids? You handle them so well." "Wait!" Tracy interrupted her mother. The view outside the hallway window seemed to distort for a moment. "Matt and I won't be able to attend the party, just so that we can take care of the kids. But you two don't have kids." That word. Again, that word. Memories of the past flashed through Tracy's mind like a carousel. About 6 months ago, after a birthday party at her parents' house, her father called Tracy into his study with a serious look on his face. "I have something to discuss with you," he began, pulling a brown envelope from the desk drawer. "Ben's eldest son is going to take the entrance exam for a private middle school. They've started to tutor him, but since Ben and his wife both work." Tracy immediately understood the veiled intention behind her father's faltering words. "Tracy, you don't have any children's education expenses. Could you help out with about $100 a month?" Tracy paused for a moment. "Is my sister helping out in the same way?" "No, she has 3 children of her own. It's tough for her." As her mother entered with coffee and snacks, she added, "Tracy, you can afford it, right? Education is important for children. We're family, so we have to help each other." Silently standing up, Tracy replied, "Let me think about it," and left the study. Her mother followed her to the entrance, throwing words at her back. "Tracy, since you don't have children, you have money to spare for the family. You understand that, right?" A year ago, on the day of her sister Jenny's children's sports day, despite having an important presentation, Tracy was coerced into attending because you, who are childless, can surely take a day off. As a result, she lost an important client. And now her mother was trying to push the care of children onto Tracy again. "Hey Tracy, you'll look after the children, right? Jenny and Ben are tired from work and raising kids every day. We want to enjoy our anniversary just us adults. Since you and your husband don't have children, you can always make time, right?" "That's a result of our choice," Tracy responded calmly but firmly. "Choosing not to have children allows us to cherish our time together. We're family, Tracy. It should be give and take." Yes, indeed, Tracy bitterly thought to herself. Always her giving, them taking. The memory goes back further. 3 years ago, during Christmas at Jenny's house, Tracy was washing dishes in the kitchen while her sister and mother talked in the next room. Do Tracy and Matt really not want to have children? They just want to do what they like. But it's convenient for us, isn't it? Always having a babysitter available in a pinch. The pain from that moment still lingered deep inside her heart-on. Such bitter memories had gradually left their scars. "I'll think about it," Tracy said shortly before hanging up the phone. Before returning to the meeting room, she let out a deep sigh. That afternoon, the client meeting ended as scheduled. However, Tracy's mind was unsettled. She tried to continue working in the office but couldn't concentrate. Eventually, she decided to leave work early. On her way home, Tracy stopped by a local wine shop. Richard, the shop owner, knew her preferences well. "You seem different today." Richard looked at her expression and said, "Something happened." After hesitating a bit, Tracy explained the situation. "Ah." Richard nodded understandingly. "I've had a similar experience. When my wife and I decided not to have children, you can imagine the reactions we got." He pulled a special bottle off the shelf. "This one is a bit pricey, but it's perfect for tonight. A special wine suits a significant decision in life." That night, Tracy explained the situation to her husband, Matt. Matt, an architect, maintained his usual calm demeanor, but anger flickered in his eyes. The couple had been married for 8 years and had decided not to have children 5 years ago after lengthy discussions and deep contemplation. At the time, Matt was involved in a school construction project in Africa. Tracy also worked at an architectural firm while engaging in support for women in developing countries. Both were proud to contribute to the world through their work. "Not having children is our choice," Tracy had said then. "Instead, let's do what we can." Since then, they have been donating part of their income to educational and women's support organizations. They were trying to contribute to society in their own way. However, their family refused to understand their choice. "Your family is always the same, huh?" Matt said, holding a wine glass. "Ever since we decided not to have children, they think they can freely use our time." As Tracy opened the wine recommended by Richard, she reminisced about past events. Indeed, that was true. Her sister Jenny has 3 children: 10-year-old Claire, 8-year-old Sarah, and 3-year-old Emma. Her brother Ben has 2 children: 7-year-old Alex and 4-year-old Nicole. Tracy had been called upon for every emergency, had her holiday plans changed, and even been asked for financial support. It was the same last Halloween. Tracy and Matt had planned a long-awaited vacation to Europe. They had made all the reservations and preparations. However, 2 days before departure, Jenny called. "Can you help make costumes for Claire's school play? I don't have time, and you're good at sewing, right?" Ultimately, Tracy canceled the trip. The cancellation fees were entirely paid by Tracy and Matt, and from Jenny, not a word of thanks, as if it were expected. "After all, my family doesn't respect our choices." Tracy sighed as she sat on the sofa. "They think our time isn't valuable because we don't have children. What should we do?" Matt sat next to his wife. "I support whatever decision you make." His words made Tracy feel warmed inside. She was glad she married him. He was the right person for her. After a moment of thought, Tracy answered, "Let's book another restaurant. It doesn't have to be Le Ciel. There are plenty of nice restaurants. A dinner just for us. And of course we won't be taking on any babysitting." Matt smiled. "That's a great idea, but the family will be angry." "It's our life," Tracy resolved. "I refuse to be treated as a convenient option any longer." That night, Tracy and Matt quietly booked a dinner at the 2-star Michelin restaurant, La Maison d'Or. It was the same night as their parents' anniversary. As she made the reservation, Tracy felt an unusual exhilaration. For so long, she had tried to meet her family's expectations. But tonight would be different. "Our time is ours." Seeing his wife's determined expression, Matt quietly nodded. The next morning, when Tracy arrived at work, there were over 10 messages about missed calls from her mother on her desk. It must be because she had emailed them the previous night that she had plans on the night of the anniversary party. She had been ignoring calls on her cell phone, but they even called her at work. With a deep sigh, she called her mother. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have told you in the email, but I have plans that day. I can't take care of the kids." "What are you talking about?" Her mother's voice was a mix of surprise and anger. "What kind of plans are so important? This is a special day for the family." "Mom, my husband and I have important plans too." "Can't you cancel?" "No, I can't." After hanging up, as expected, calls of protest followed from her sister and brother. Tracy felt all her pent-up patience and frustrations bursting forth. "How selfish!" Jenny yelled. "Why can't you cooperate when you don't even have children?" "Busy, huh?" Ben's tone was sarcastic. "We're busy too, raising kids while working." "Yes, everyone is busy, but somehow only our child-free time is taken for granted." Tracy handled all the calls calmly, yet firmly. However, the constant calling from them during work and at all hours gradually wore her down. Sick of being harassed by her family, she felt on the verge of breaking. That night, she discussed the situation with Matt. "Let's just agree to take care of the kids," Tracy told her husband. Matt looked a bit surprised but quickly showed understanding. "All right, do as you wish." Until the day, Tracy continued her act skillfully. "Of course, leave the kids to me. What time should I come over? I'll prepare the snacks." The family believed everything without a doubt. On the anniversary day, Tracy and Matt started getting ready with a quiet determination. They dressed up, did their makeup, and looked at each other. Tonight was for them. At the scheduled time, Jenny called. "Tracy, aren't you coming yet? The kids are waiting." "Sorry, Jenny." Tracy's voice was calm. "We're not coming tonight." "What do you mean?" "We've booked La Maison d'Or. We're spending time as a couple tonight." Over the phone, Tracy could hear Jenny gasping for air. "You must be joking. You promised to look after the kids." "Sorry, but tonight is our time." After that, the phone rang explosively. "How could you do something so terrible?" Her mother cried out. "The kids are crying. They can't go to the party because of you." The cries of children could be heard over the phone. In that moment of wavering, Matt gently held Tracy's hand. His warmth strengthened her resolve. How awful. Her mother accused through tears. On such an important day. "You're no longer my daughter." Those words left a deep scar in Tracy's heart. Yet, they also clarified the true nature of their relationship. Love was always conditional, contingent on meeting the family's expectations. Ignoring all incoming calls, Tracy and her husband headed to La Maison d'Or. However, upon arriving at the restaurant's parking lot, they faced an unexpected scene. Both parents, Jenny and her husband, Ben and his wife, were blocking the entrance, and shockingly, all the kids were there too. "Get out, Tracy." Her mother's voice echoed in the night. Tracy and Matt got out of the car and faced their family. "How dare you deceive the kids?" Jenny shouted. "You're trampling over the kids' feelings." "No." Tracy stared directly into her sister's eyes. "I'm teaching the kids to value their own choices, even if those choices go against someone else's expectations." "Are you planning to betray your family?" Ben yelled. "Betrayal?" Tracy replied quietly, yet firmly. "Isn't it a betrayal that the family tried to make us just babysitters, excluding us?" "Aunt Tracy." Claire came forward, crying. She was 10 and the most thoughtful child among them. "I'm sorry we made you lie." Claire's voice was trembling. "I understand how you feel, Aunt. We've always been demanding too much from you." Tears welled up in Tracy's eyes at her words. Seeing the kids, her heart swayed greatly, especially seeing her youngest niece, Emma, trembling in the cold night air. "We have a dinner reservation, so we will be leaving now." They yelled insults at her again, but Tracy endured without faltering and said, "This will be the last time we meet." The last time. Her mother asked in confusion, "We want to cut ties." Tracy took a breath and continued, "Don't think our time isn't valuable just because we don't have kids. Not having children is our choice, but our family never respected that choice, not even once." "What are you saying?" Jenny started, but Tracy cut her off. "How much do you think we've sacrificed until now? How many sudden requests have we accepted? Yet you assumed it was natural to exclude us today, to expect us as mere caregivers for the kids." "But we're family, right?" her father said. "It's because we're family," Tracy replied firmly. "We should have respected each other's choices, but to you, we were just a convenience." "Tracy," her mother exclaimed, "don't speak like that. You are my precious daughter. Did you really care about me?" Tears welled up in Tracy's eyes. "Or was I just a convenience?" A heavy silence fell over the parking lot. "It's cold, kids. Let's go home," Tracy said quietly. "We're going home too. This is the last time. Don't contact us anymore." "Wait," her mother cried out. "Don't end it like this." "Mom." Tracy looked straight into her mother's eyes. "I'm not the one ending this. You all have been trying to end us for a long time, by devaluing a life without children." Tracy and Matt returned to their car. In the rearview mirror, the image of the family standing there remained. Because the kids no longer had a place to stay, the parents' anniversary party ultimately had to be canceled. Later, Tracy and Matt headed to La Maison d'Or. The decision to sever ties with her parents and siblings made that night an unforgettable dinner marking a new beginning. But it was a result of their choice. No more regrets. "Did we do the right thing?" Tracy asked her husband. Matt hugged her. "Yes, sometimes cutting ties is necessary to protect oneself." From that night on, Tracy's relationship with her family was completely severed. But it was also a new beginning, a start to living with pride in their choices. A night when years of accumulated frustration and anger were expressed through betrayal. "Do you regret it?" Matt asked his wife. Tracy thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, this was our choice." That night, Tracy made a lengthy post on Reddit. She detailed the circumstances of being excluded from her parents' 50th anniversary party and being expected to take care of the kids, about her relationship with her family, the financial support, emergency assistance, and the sacrifices that were always expected as a matter of course. The post sparked an explosive response, with many users condemning the family's selfish behavior. One anonymous comment stood out particularly. "I've had a similar experience. Families try to control our lives under the guise of blood ties, but true family should respect each other's choices. I support your decision." Support also poured in from childless married individuals who empathized with Tracy's situation. For the first time, she realized she was not alone. Days later, the post caught her family's eyes as it was unexpectedly spread on social media. "How dare you air such embarrassing stories online?" her father raged. "Don't expose our family's shame to the world," her mother lamented. "You're no longer my sister," Jenny declared. "I never want to see your face again. You're exposing our family's shame," Ben said coldly. "You're no longer part of our family." But this time, Tracy did not apologize. Instead, she voiced the thoughts she had been harboring for years. "We've always been treated as just a convenience because we don't have children." She sent a message to all her family members. "But that's over. We have our own lives and choices. We won't be used anymore." Those words unleashed the emotions she had been suppressing, like a dam breaking. The relationship between Tracy and her family was completely severed from that day. Tracy blocked their emails and cell phone numbers, so she didn't know what happened afterward. But Tracy heard that her parents and siblings are isolated, criticized by all the relatives. "Because we don't have children, our lives have no value." Tracy smiled. "That's not true. We have our own happiness." Although she sometimes saw photos of her niece and nephew posted on social media, direct interactions had ceased. Only Claire occasionally sent her emails. It seemed she had learned something important from Tracy's decisions. "Aunt Tracy, when I grow up, I want to be someone who can cherish my own choices." Those words lit a warm light in Tracy's heart. 5 years later, Claire visited Tracy. "Grandma and Grandpa have been distancing themselves from us grandchildren lately. They try to control us just like they did with you. They want to dictate our hobbies and career paths. Alex wants to pursue music, but Grandma strongly opposes it. And she's against Emma's swimming and Sarah's programming too, saying they lack future prospects. She's also opposing my study abroad. Since that day, we siblings and cousins have learned a lot from your choice. We decide our own lives. Just because we're family doesn't mean we can control each other's lives. Grandma often says, don't end up like Aunt Tracy, but it's counterproductive. We respect the way you live." Claire looked straight at Tracy. "We all started avoiding meetings with Grandma and Grandpa. We don't go to the weekend gatherings anymore. Our parents haven't noticed yet, but Grandma and Grandpa's mindset is pushing us away." That night, Tracy opened her mother's social media page for the first time in a long while. There were still photos of happy family gatherings, but the presence of grandchildren was gradually decreasing. Instead, old family photos increased, and comments like, "I miss those times," were becoming more prominent. Ironically, the very thing Tracy had been trying to communicate was now becoming a reality. The attitude of trying to control others' lives can even break the most important family bonds. A few days later, a message came from her mother through social media for the first time in a long time. "Tracy, something's wrong with the grandchildren lately. They're distancing themselves from me like you did." "Why?" Tracy sighed upon reading the words. Her mother still hadn't realized her own mistakes. Afterward, Tracy and Matt decided to move abroad. Matt got involved in international architectural projects, and Tracy thrived in her new job. She founded a support group for childless married couples, becoming a pillar of support for people in similar situations. Their new life in a different city showed them new possibilities. They traveled around the world on vacations and contributed to society through their professional skills. Their new life turned out to be more fulfilling than they had expected. Tracy began working as a consultant for an international NGO involved in women's support programs in developing countries. Matt was working on innovative projects in environmentally friendly architectural design. The two were contributing to the next generation in their own way. It wasn't through direct parenting, but their activities held significant meaning. Reconciliation with the family was likely never going to happen. However, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes cutting ties is the healthiest choice one can make.